Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions, Monday, 4 p.m. BST, Mindset Monday, one of my favorite days of the week. And two of some of my favorite people, but very, very good friends, is Liran Hirschkorn and Barkus Patty are both here. Today, we're going to be talking about, as fathers, how can we help manage and refine the help of our children with COVID going on and all the situation with mental health. And we're looking at it from a father's perspective. We've always had a fantastic view of our partners. You know, they struggle themselves. Is like, how can they best manage and do their best to bring up their children? I think it's something that we as fathers may not talk about as much. So hopefully the audience will find some of this useful. We're not here to teach you how to parent. These are just sharing experiences of ourselves. Without further ado, go around the room, starting with you, Liran. I'm going to share to the groups. Do you want to do an introduction?
Sure. Liran Hirschkorn, and I've been in the Amazon space since 2014, and yeah, happy to be on.
Excellent. And Barkus?
Yeah, kind of the same. I've been in this space since 2015, selling here and there, and then also in the software side. So yeah.
Cool. And I think a lot of people that tune into the show realize just recently you've just started to recover from COVID.
Oh yeah. I'm over that. It's been about a week since I haven't had any symptoms or anything like that. So it was a unique experience, but everything's good now.
Well, it's good to see you back in the game. All right. So just kicking off first, I know, Liran, you haven't seen this, but it's going to be very easy for you to keep up on that side. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of commentary from you with other stuff around the father-child aspect, you know, or family aspect. Mm-hmm. Social dilemma. Barkus, I sat down with Cheryl and Maya and we watched it, and that was a bit of an experience the weekend. Can I start getting your headline thoughts on it yourself?
Yeah. Well, so how Facebook works in advertising, like we all get that, like that, none of that blew my mind. What really bothered me was two things. Was that, and I don't know if there's a direct correlation. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. And I certainly don't pretend to be one. But there's a drastic increase in depression, anxiety, and suicide in preteens.
Yes,
that really bothers me. You know, just as a parent. But then also, I can't remember the lady's name, but there was a lady talking about the psychologists, like Facebook, Google. They all have psychologists that work there.
Yeah.
And in the software, but there's not, and maybe there is now, maybe a little bit, but there's not a social aspect of like, how is our product affecting human beings? So that kind of bothers me just as a parent. Like, I know how addicted I am to this thing. Like, I carry it around everywhere I go. I try.
We're sitting here on Facebook. The irony of having this kind of conversation.
Yeah. And the president of Pinterest, the former president of Pinterest, made a good point. Like, social media has done some amazing things. You know, like I wouldn't know you guys without that. But then some just amazing, mind blowing things that never would have happened without that technology. But you know, how your product is impacting your users. That was the biggest impact for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to read out some quotes. Liran, you can help me pick some of these quotes apart. I know you haven't seen it just yet, but I'd like to get your opinions on this.
Yep.
So some of the quotes here, these are just, I'll share the links after. The very meaning of culture is manipulation. These are like quotes taken from it. How much of your life can we get you to give to us? Well, these are all out the program, right? We're the product. Our attention is the product being sold to advertisers. If you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. Social media isn't a tool that's just been waiting to be used. It has its own goals and it has its own means of pursuing them. It's a marketplace that trades exclusively on human futures. We want them to keep doing this with their finger so that you're being programmed at a deeper level. We want to psychologically figure out how to manipulate you as fast as possible. Social media starts to dig deeper and deeper down into the brain stem and take over kids' sense of self-worth and identity. That is pretty heavy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a business and it's designed to make us spend as much time as possible on the platform at any cost. It seems like, you know, I think it's a good thing that there are documentaries like this, and it's bringing out that awareness. And I think we have we are being manipulated, at the end of the day, and we need to take steps to counteract the manipulation. Unfortunately, it's not easy, because every psychological warfare is is used against you on social media, and it's designed to get you to stay on as long as possible, waste your time, look at ads, and like Marcus said, there's a lot of benefits, to it as well. I think it's just I think the education around it is important, and using it sort of responsibly, or knowing some of the underlying things about social media, like most of what you see is an illusion, right? It's not reality. And I think especially for kids, they're looking at it and thinking they're seeing a reality of other people's lives, and comparing themselves, and this is why it leads to that anxiety and depression and issues. So I think education around it is important, like you said, to know that most of what you're seeing is like an illusion, and as parents to try to put some things in place to educate, and also to limit the amount of time that your kids are on social media. My wife and I, we basically, for my 6-year-old, she is not allowed to be on the iPad during the week, only on the weekends, right? Because after school, like, she can watch. We much rather have her watch TV, like she does. She has a little bit of homework now. She's in 1st grade, and much rather have her watch some TV than be on the iPad, because it's so much more difficult to get it to take it away from her. It's so much more addicting. And so, I think putting some of these things in place is important.
Some other quotes here as well, which goes back to what you're saying, almost like the illusion here. It says, any sufficient advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. There are only two industries that call customers users: illegal drugs and software.
Yep. Yeah.
But the bit that gets me is that when you talk about the psychological aspect, where they're going into the STEM, a STEM level of the mind, using psychology, and what they're doing is the direction of mood as well. So if someone's using this technology, let's just say facial recognition and all those kind of things, all the attributes, everything you're doing. So they're saying it's almost like each individual gets their Truman Show, because we're not all seeing the same things. We're getting stuff that's fed to us. The more clicks, the more things that we do at a systemic level, that is changing. If you go really deep, like we're talking on a micro, not a macro, if you think about it in a psychological aspect, you've got this situation where moods and that are changed. Like, let's say we look at some parts of, say, Instagram and everything else. Some of the drive for attention can be down to envy as well. People put nice cars and all these kind of things, and there are always going to be people, that's really great, this is good. And then there's always going to be envious people. And on the flip side, you've got this dysmorphia thing where some youngsters are looking to want to get plastic surgery to look like they do in a filter. Mm-hmm. I mean, as fathers, what do we, my daughter hasn't said that, but as fathers, how do you respond to that, Liran? I mean, if you had that question, Dad, want to go and get some plastic surgery? One, it's no, fuck off. And two, I want to look like this filter.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah. Look, but at that point, maybe there's things you should have done ahead of that point, right?
Which we're going to talk about
to prevent that from happening in the first place. But I think it's getting to, I think it's partly like, what are your values? What do you value? Is it the external way that you look, or is it the, is it the characteristics of yourself that are maybe more important, right? Like, the type of person you are, how you are with your friends, if you like to share, if you like to give, like, if, there's, I think part of it is, I think as a society, we put a lot of focus, or we put a lot more value on external sometimes than on internal. So I think putting some of these values. I read a quote this weekend. I think I may have sent to you that said, give your kids values, not presents. And it's instilling that that filter is not that important, right? Like, how do you deal with it at that point? I think as a parent, you have to say, hey, that's not happening.
Of course, but what I'm saying is the shock, and then how do you? And I'm talking about as a father. We've all got daughters, right?
Yeah.
There's a different dynamic between a son and a father, and a daughter, and a daughter and their mother, etc., etc. But then, what would you do as a father? There's the reactions are going to be a lot different to your partner, and it's stuff you still have to think about, and you still have to look behind the psychology of it. Is like, how the fuck did we get here? Why is that question being asked? If it's asked, I'm not saying anyone's been asked this around the table. Then you have done enough deep work with your child. If they get, but parents out there will get that question answered.
You know that your child, maybe is dealing with a low self-esteem, right? If they're trying to change the way they look. But again, where you can say that social media is in part responsible for that low self-esteem, right? Because it's like you said, the other the fancy stuff people are posting, but nobody on social media posts when they're lonely, sad, depressed. Like you only see people's highlights, right? So I think the education for your kids around it is, that's not real life. That's it's entertainment, and you need to differentiate between that.
But that's the thing. We're developed adults, right? So we should, if we're being reared in the right way, be able to determine the two.
And even adults are depressed from social media. Of course.
But what I'm saying is, when you at that level, when you've got kids, the blur in those realities. If you've got a kid that sits in front of the screen, I'm not saying yours, but generally, if a kid sits in front of the screen like that all day, that becomes an extension, right? Because it becomes a habit, and it's habit forming. So when do we get to the point where recognizing for them, or them to completely still understanding the separation between the two?
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, you wouldn't be asking those questions to look like a filter. Yeah.
I see with my daughter, she's like, she wants to be a YouTuber and she wants to be famous. And I'm like, being famous is not all that great. Like there's like, it's not all like, not that I'm famous and I know, right? But like, a lot of famous people hate being famous, right? They can't go anywhere. They can't, they don't have the same kind of private life that you can have with, without being famous. And I try to now at 6 to counteract, instead of telling her, you should want to be famous, to like, just the goal of being famous
is not enough. If you're going to be famous, do it for something worthwhile of substance.
For doing something good, but just the goal of being famous for being famous, and when I hear that, I immediately turn around and tell her, being famous is not that great.
No.
And I try to counteract the stuff that I'm hearing.
Yeah. Marcus, can I bring you in here as well? I'd like to get your opinion if your daughter came to you and asked to look like a filter.
Yeah, I mean, that my response would be yours in the beginning, but I think I see a lot of drastic differences. My son Noah's 13 and my daughter Sophia, she's 11, and then my youngest is 3. There's drastic differences in them. Like Sophia doesn't have any social media. She had TikTok for like a minute, and I'm like, no, there's some no, you just no. So she doesn't have any social media on her phone. And then my son has Instagram, but he barely uses it. So, and now I'll say this, my kids have phones, but they also know I have their passwords. My fingerprint is actually on both their phones too. So they also know that I'll come get them at any time and look through them. And I do occasionally, and it's not I don't think that they're doing anything wrong. I'm worried about like creepy guys trying to DM my 11-year-old daughter. So that's why she doesn't have any social media. So with her, it's a little, I've started to see her grow up, especially over the past, year or so, where she's starting to be influenced by her friends, which is natural. We're all influenced by the people that are around us. And an example, like this summer, she's an 11-year-old girl. So she loves unicorns, and she was wearing a shirt with just a unicorn on it. And one of her friends was like, that's a child. You shouldn't wear that, like that, blah, blah, blah. And my daughter was offended and she was upset. And I was like, I'm glad that you're upset. It is completely okay to be upset. Please don't go hit this child. But I was like, it's perfectly happy. It's perfectly okay to do whatever you want to do. And I try to instill that in my kids. Like, I don't care what you want to do in your life. If you're happy, it's all that matters to me. You stay out of jail, give me grandkids. That's all I really need out of life from you guys. So, but
grandkids, but there's a time limit. We don't want to be going into the movie Bad Boys where he takes her out. Do you remember Will Smith and stuff like that's me? As soon as the first,
I'm pretty unstable. But with going back to all that, I think that what I try to do with my daughters is try to do these affirmations. So especially with my 3-year-old, it's like every night or every morning. Who's so beautiful. It's kind of like a game for her. Who's so beautiful, who's so smart, who's so pretty, who's so strong, and she's always like replying me. Cause like, I want her to like, no matter what, she knows that's part of her. And then I think that we're all influenced by the people around us, and especially social media. But I mean that the keeping up with the Joneses has existed since the beginning of time. Like when the first cars came around, people were envious because they were on their horse and not in their Model T. So that'll always, social media definitely like just blows that. My children, and my son's different. My son's very different. He chill. I want to play with my boys on Fortnite, and we've got that set where sending messages and that kind of locked down, but I give them their freedoms and they get good grades. Their behavior doesn't change. So it's kind of like, especially with COVID, I'm like, all the rules for us have just gone, hey, let's just roll over, wait till the thing's kind of back to some sort of normal.
You keep dropping, mate. Are you on Wi-Fi? Sorry. Your signal's dropping a little bit. Are you on Wi-Fi? Or are you on Ethernet? Yeah.
I'm on Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Okay. It's all right. We'll roll it out. It just you was just dropping for a bit.
Danny, COVID certainly made this much more difficult for kids. I think in a lot of ways. Number one, I think parents are a lot more lax. Myself as well. Like when. My daughter now is back in school, so school's open. So, now she's not allowed to use the iPad, during the week, but from March until the end of until recently, she was on the iPad every single day because she's home. And so, we were lax, and my wife and I are both working. So like she's home and that's the babysitter, like you kind of have no choice in a lot of ways. So, I think there was been a lot more exposure to social media for kids and for teens. And, I think the lack of social interaction has also been very difficult for kids and teens, and just being on social media. So like, it's almost, it's almost made worse by, during COVID, I think.
With you guys, probably you don't have to answer this, but as fathers, like, it don't matter what manual you buy or whatever, and it's very hard to backtrack on your life to have the same structure to do the same as your parents did with you, because the dynamics are completely different. They're in different decades. So one of my things is that, I'll be honest, I struggle with. I was brought up by my mum, and my mum married a few times, and she was mum and dad most of the time. So while she's trying to play both of these roles, and then I left home at a very young age, and you get to the stage, like for me, it's like you're almost reparenting for yourself. You left home very young, you're making those adjustments. And now I'm bringing up a daughter. I've lost 2 of my children. I have to deal with the fact that she may develop trauma, which is going back to a point I want to cover earlier on. When you say, when you get to that stage, when you say, Dad, I want to look like a filter. I think a lot of we have to be careful. Parents is in childhood, either you've had your own trauma or your children have had trauma, and that's stuff that you've got to watch for later on, because all of those things end up becoming into within the subconscious, and there'll be later in life there'll be stages where micro traumas come along, and they can be triggers of those, and you have to be very careful. And I found as a father is that I can't bring up Maya like I was brought up. The environment is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to also be careful of entitlement for her, because where I come from, where she come from, are two different worlds. But she needs to know a bit about that world to protect herself in this world, stepping out the front door and going somewhere as a sovereign individual, and walking down the wrong street or in the wrong environment, and know how to handle that. And it's slowly trying to work out, well, how do you go from a mum playing mum and dad to then you playing the dad role of it's bizarre to think about. And I think this is like, there isn't a handbook. You go along and you have to do this for yourself, and you have to make mistakes. And I don't know if you can introduce, like Liran, your upbringing, is it the same? Are you able to be rigidly the same from your upbringing and replicate that with your daughter?
No, I feel like I'm probably a lot softer in some ways, or I feel like in general parents today kind of are more, I don't know, the kids today have more than like what you had, right? Like, yeah. I think a lot of us, right, we try to give our kids, we want to give our kids more than what we had. And I mean, I had a normal sort of upbringing, but like certainly didn't get everything I wanted all the time. And sometimes my wife and I with my daughter, when it's something almost silly that my daughter wants, it's not important, we may not give it to her on purpose, right? Just for her to sort of experience that you don't just get everything you want all the time, although she does get a lot of the time. But we do try to also at sometimes say no to things, because I think that builds some grit and some, I think in the real world, you're not gonna get a yes to everything. And I think that's also why people, to the millennials that are out there, and why millennials have a bad rep, is because millennials sort of grew up where everybody got a trophy. It doesn't matter if you were first place or 10th place,
come 16th in the egg and spoon race, you still got a trophy. Yeah,
exactly. And that's also not great in our culture, because when you're in life, that's not how things really work. So we try to kind of balance that out, although I would say my daughter gets a lot more, I feel like and I think kids today just get away with a lot more how they talk to their parents, how all this kind of stuff, from where
she's got you wrapped around her little finger. I've seen her.
Yeah. But and I would say in general, my wife is probably more strict than I am. But we try to balance things out.
Barkus, same to you. Winging it, struggle. Do you have your moments where you go, Jesus Christ, what am I doing here? How do I get around this one?
Yeah, every day. No, my childhood was very different from my children's, and me looking back, it didn't seem that bad because it was so young for me. But then I tell my wife about it, and she jokes, and she's like, Jesus, like, I'm surprised you're like a functioning human being. And it doesn't really register to me like that. Like, my mom remarried when I was 5, and that's just been dad. He's never been Marty. He's just dad. And the stuff that preceded that, like, is just, I when I start talking to people about it, they're like, wow. But anyway, so my kids, I want to instill, like Liran was talking about, instilling grit. Like, my kids, Noah and Sophia, they're old enough now. If they want something, like, okay, cool. Do you have your money? Oh, no. Okay, cool. Well, you can make money. Like, my kids don't realize that I would go broke because I tell them all the time, like, hey, if you want to make money, I got plenty for you to do. There's plenty of things. And my son this summer he actually did a lot. I gave him I made him a deal. I said, hey, you're going to get paid this amount of money if you work with me every day this week, doing whatever that I'm doing, just stuff around. I had a staycation, took a week off of work and just finished up a bunch of projects around the house. And not once did he complain. And he's like, okay, yes, sir, blah, blah, blah. And he started to kind of enjoy the mechanics of like fixing something or taking something apart, figuring out what's wrong, building something, creating something. So, and I talked to him about it later. I was like, would you have rather, and because I wanted to see Gage's, like, did you feel good about making that money versus me just giving you the money? And he's like, yeah, he's like, I kind of enjoy it. So I want to instill that in them like early on. Like, if you want something cool, you're old enough to, like, you can make the money for it. Like, he saved up this year to buy an Xbox. I'm like, you want one? Cool. You can pay for it. And that's what he did. So, yeah.
Well, I'm Saturday I sat Maya down and made a point of it, vertical kind of communication on the same level, not necessarily parent to father to daughter conversation, more of like, it got built up this thing with entitlement, and she wants to do a room up and she wants it now, and there's all these kind of things, and it went off and off and off, and we had an argument about it. The next day I sat her down at the table. I said, right, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to dock you 8 weeks pocket money, and you're going to get a spreadsheet out and you're going to project manage all the stuff you want in your bedroom, your carpets and everything else. And I'm going to give you a fixed budget, and anything you want in that room you can have, but you have to make your way of getting there by being creative. So we looked at different lights. So we said, well, if we'd done that and backlit the background and stuff, because I don't want her to become entitled. And I noticed that change in her, and she took it on really well as a 14-year-old child. I mean, I give her pocket money and so does Cheryl. So she has some pocket money coming in, but I needed to show her, it's like, you can have what you want. And then you're working in the house. She does housework and that. You're earning your money. But we've got to get rid of this entitlement, because you'll grow up and you'll become one of these obnoxious kids that no one's going to like. And the moment you hit a small brick in the road or a failure, you're going to fold. So you need to learn from it. And it's harsh. I'm saying this publicly. I docked her 8 weeks, but she took it on board. And I think you have to do stuff like that. I like what you're doing with, I mean, is it Emily, your daughter?
Yeah.
She's too young, right? So it's not, but your son Barkers understands. If he understands old enough to be entitled, he understands he's old enough to go and work for it as well. And think that part of that education, sometimes it's tough. Otherwise, I think it would get out of control. And that's where problems can start in relationships as well. They're giving them too much.
100%.
I think also, in terms of asking for stuff, like, I will, if she's asking for something and it's something bigger, then we'll say, yeah, you'll get it for your birthday or for the next holiday or for whatever it is, right? Like, I think instilling a sense of value to things is important.
Let's have a look here. We've got some. Tiffany says, good morning. Tim says, father of 5 here who makes his living doing Amazon sales and social media. I think constantly about this all in time in relation to parenting. Awesome topic. Tiff says, great guys on the panel. Yelchin says, hello, gents. Matt Parker is a long one here. Hey, guys, I'm with Barkers. I have 4 and 6-year-old girls. Lead with positive affirmations. It's tough for kids. To get them through this, you can imagine telling the 6-year-old version of yourself to stay home, do homework, and keep safe. Personally, I will be going absolutely bloody nuts. I think we need to be realistic and think about ourselves at an age, how we would relate to this. It's a very difficult situation for me to conceive because I've never been through it at this age. The message just runs off the page, Matt, so you might need to bring in the rest of it. But I get the sentiment the sentiment here. Spit it out, Dan. So where do you guys see it going now? In your kids are growing up, and how do you adapt as fathers? Like, have you seen a pattern change for yourself, Barkers? Like, you go through different stages which require different parental set that you have to develop.
Yeah. I
He's frozen.
like being so quick to fly off. No, can you
Yeah,
guys hear
back
me
now.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that I've grown a lot more patience as my kids grow older. Thank God, because I didn't have any early on. And there's been times where like the difficult conversation of like relationships with them. So like my daughter was like earlier this year, my daughter liked a guy and then he didn't like her and blah blah blah. They liked each other for a minute, whatever. And then she was upset. And I was like, look, number one, guys are trash until they're like 40.
Yeah.
And I said, number two, I said, you're going to go through this 1,000 times before you find the person that is right for you. And I said, all I want you to do is be safe and happy. And I said, be yourself. Just be yourself. And I said, you do not try to be.
We lost you again, Barkus.
Anybody for that man. You only be yourself. And my son too, like he kind of liked a girl and they're both kind of embarrassed to talk about it because I joke that I'll just, be irrational and unstable. But and I told him the same thing. And I told him too, I was like, listen, if I ever hear of you being disrespectful to any woman, including your mother, I was like, it's game over. Like the very least that will happen is like, all your electronics are gone until I decide to get
What about
back. And that
what's your
I kind of told my daughter the same way. I was like, you're bullying somebody.
Sorry, kept losing you. Could you just repeat that last little bit, Barkus? Sorry.
I just love staring at Barkus's frozen face.
Yeah, his lovely beard. He's got. Yeah, go on. Yeah, so we lost you again there, mate.
Can you get? Am I good now?
Yeah, good now. Just repeat that last bit because there's a lovely sentiment there.
Turn the video off.
Yeah, turn the video off for a moment and come back in on the video. But there's a lovely sentiment there that you sat down and said, all guys are trash until they're 40. Can you repeat that bit again? I think that's really important. And we still lost him. All right.
I have one more year until I'm not trash.
Are you 39? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Barkus. Let's see if we can get it out of you. Actually, do you want to dial out?
Well, I can only say I get with the last sentiment.
Yeah, you really, really choppy. Do you want to come out of the room and then come back in? While we're doing that, Liran, what is your thoughts on your daughter protecting herself?
We try to instill these things, even already in first grade, there's this kid who seems to be kind of bossy and, tells her what to do kind of a thing. And like, and she's like, well, if I don't listen, I can't play in the game, and I'm like, no. I'm like, it doesn't work, it doesn't work that way, And so I think the biggest, sort of lesson for me in parenting and in all this is to talk to your kids and to, I heard somebody say that the greatest gift you can give your kids is your time. Oh. Right. And I think that's, and I'm guilty of this just as much as anybody else, but, our kids see us on the phones all the time too. Mm. And, sort of, it's somewhat hypocritical to say to them, to get off your phone or not be on social media all the time or all this stuff when we ourselves are addicted to it. So, I think for me, I try to take some time each week and spend with her without the phone, without, while paying full attention and giving that time and sort of being a good example. Again, I think it's something I also often fail at because there are a lot of times where, I'm walking into her bedroom to say goodnight as I'm on my phone looking down on my phone and then give her a quick hug and kiss. And, I'm, looking at a message from somebody also. But I try to have on my mind to also spend time that, I don't have the phone with me, that it's, talking to her, that it's, and, and when you can talk and listen to some of these things like a bully in school or whatever, then you can instill maybe some good lessons on how to deal with it. But I think the biggest thing is trying to spend time with your kids, because we're all so distracted, ourselves.
And have you had to deal with any bullying for your children?
Not any, like major cases, but I tell my daughter that nobody gets to control the game, and she can start her own game, and I try to empower her. One of the things Bark has said is like these affirmations. One of the things I've done with my daughter since she was a baby is told her, asked her, what do you have inside of you, and telling her back the answer is greatness and unlimited potential. Means you could do anything, and instilling some confidence, I think, is also important. That's kind of stuff I didn't have when I was that kind of like affirmation, I think wasn't as popular. I think when we were kids, it was more popular if you spilled the milk to say, why do you always spill the milk? And I think that can change how a child feels about himself from being empowered, and or when a child spills the milk to say, hey, accidents happen, no big deal, or you always spill the milk, right? And that little bit of like language and how you use it with your kids, I think is super super important in terms of how the level of their self-esteem and self-confidence. But I don't, I'm not dealing with so much yet of like comparing herself to other kids and stuff on social media, but she does emulate and want to, she follows these YouTubers who are doing videos and stuff, and she does kind of want to be like that. But again, I'm sure it's not all glamorous either.
Barkus, have you had to deal with any bullying with any of your children been on the receiving end?
Very minor stuff, like nothing that I.
Oh, Paul, we keep losing you there, mate.
Compared to what I grew up with, what I saw. Yeah. But I told my daughter and my son that it's okay to be angry about something. It all depends on how you react to it. Like you can be mad all day long. You don't have to like if I tell you to clean your room. Like you can be mad at somebody for what they said about you, but it's all about how you.
We lost you there again.
How you deal with that? Think it out. Like that's fine. Just don't kick somebody in the face. That's so. It's
We had a situation a few years ago with Maya. She was close friends with this girl, and they used to go to dance school and stuff together. And it's one of those where you're in they're all in these like WhatsApp groups. And as kids, it's like 6 of one and half a dozen the other. But then we got this stage where Maya didn't want to go to school. She was hyperventilating. She's crying. And I'm like, look, you got to go to school. Go and sort it out. And they couldn't find a way forward to sort it out. So I spoke to the parents, but the parents weren't interested. So I said, look, just stay apart. But it makes it very difficult in the same WhatsApp group when they're talking. And I see the messages and stuff. The problem is, as a parent, you can't really get involved on that level. And you have to remember they're your child. That's someone else's child. You can over what's the word? I'm trying to think of the best word for it. You can get to the stage where like you can be over supportive of your own child because you are going to their your flesh and blood and everything else. So I tried to speak with the father, and he didn't show up at our place. I would have met him in mutual ground or whatever, and it wouldn't stop. And I'm like, Maya, you got to step back. And she said, Dad, look, I am stepping back, but I'm being pulled into this, and I don't want it. And this kid was sending Maya's, she full dysregulation in terms of emotions and everything else. She just didn't want to go to school and stuff. And in the end, it was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this down to the school, right? And the way I'm going to deal with it, we're going to get to the truth, because there's your side, their side, and then there's the truth. Right. I need to know this isn't you. If this is you, you've got to make them a big apology to everyone in the school, if this is you. Dad, it's not me, it's not me. And so I said this to the other parents, messages are going back. And I just said to him, look, I don't care about losing face. I just want to get to the truth. I've got a daughter that's dysregulated. Her emotions are up and down. She's hyperventilating. She don't want to go to school. You don't want to address the situation. If you don't address the situation, I will take it down to the school. If I've got to do a big apology in front of everyone and lose face, I'm more happy to do that. But I will not have it with my daughter crying every single day because someone's wrong. And as I said to Maya, I said, look, this will be a landmark in your life. If you are lying now to me, this will go on and affect you, your relationships with everyone in the school. Basically, the other kids' parents must have spoke to the daughter. They were kept separate. But it's a very, very stressful time. There wasn't any, like, you know, any fights in the playground like when we were kids, Liran. How did you settle things? You go out the back gate, don't you?
Yeah.
Your kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're in a new world now, and we can't get involved in that. And with social media, them guys having phones and everything else, being pulled into that whirlpool and having people set upon each other. It's a bit like, you know, trolling effectively, but it's done in the group. And some of the messages I was reading, it was very, very sly, very manipulative and underhanded. And I even see the person, I've seen her before when she's done stuff like that, and she give one of those little smirks, you know, where the mouth goes up. Like, it was almost like she took pleasure in someone else's dysregulation of their emotions. And I just thought, and the parents didn't want to address it, but I didn't want to do that. I've got an upset wife. I've got a daughter that, and you get to a point, it's like, what the fuck do you do? It's like you're really in a position now, because some parents I've seen, they argue it with each other down the schools, or you see a parent go and talk and address with the child. I don't think you can really do that. But I had to step back as a father and say, look, I have to take this on the chin, but we've got to get to the truth, because I can't carry on with that. And it was, I think as a family, it wasn't one of our toughest times, because obviously we'd lost two of our children. They were the toughest time. But that there, watching helplessly your daughter struggle, and as a father, you can't do anything. Just kind of,
Gotta hurt.
So moving on. Anyway, sorry about that rant, but I think it's important if you're dealing with, is how do you deal with that bullying? You know, whether it's psychologically or it's physical, you've got to deal with it. Let's talk a bit about more like with COVID and everything else. And is there I mean, as parents, do you think about how you can help manage the mental health of your children? Because even like, they're not always going to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, Barkus, if your signal's good at the moment. So and then get to Liran. What do you think about when it comes to managing the mental health of your kids?
I think maybe like the past year or so, maybe longer, I've been conscious of it. So for example, Noah and Sophia, they're from a previous marriage, and and Sophia, and we get them all the time. Like, we get them a standard every other weekend, but they're not that far away, so we get them anytime we need. Like, you know, anytime we do extra things for them and stuff. So my Sophia is more comfortable opening up to Bethany, my wife, than me about certain things. You know, like for earlier this year, she still doesn't really get why me and Bethany are together and her mom aren't together. Like, there's a little bit of angst there because she just doesn't really understand everything, and it's not for her to understand at 11, you know. So I've embraced that, you know, like because Bethany's like, I don't know what to do. I was like, look, just talk to her, just listen to her, whatever. She's like, well, you know, am I doing anything wrong? I was like, no, like you're doing. If she wants to talk to you over me, I don't take it personally, whatever, you know.
Right.
And my son too, like he's it's hard to get him to open sometimes. But when I do, he'll get, it's kind of just, you know, he's not me at all. Like my person, like he's got my brain where it's like, I want to take everything apart and figure out these things. And he's a nerd, but he doesn't have my personality. He's really chill and analytical and things. And My daughters are my Rage Against the Machine. Like they're just me, my personality, like rambunctious, spontaneous. So my son takes him a little bit of time to open up, but I'm always like, hey, anytime you need to talk about anything, let me know. Like I'm always asking them about what's going on in school, what's going on with your friends, all these things. And I tried to talk to them about COVID, like what's happening. And because with social media too, like, and you hear, you know, with kids in different households, they'll hear different opinions. And I'm like, look, we don't understand exactly what this is. Because the whole mask thing, when it came out, they're like, well, I don't understand why we have to. I was like, well, you know what? We're not doctors and we're not scientists. We're going to err on the
we lost you there, mate.
Side of caution, because this doesn't go wrong about that. Then not wear a mask could be wrong about that. You know, so trying to talk to them about current, unfortunately, with politics and things, those are coming thing. And I'm like, look, it's a tough time, and you're going to hear differences that person votes, you know. And I said, if somebody votes in an election, you can't really complain about what they have to say. And I said, you're going to hear a lot of different opinions, and you're going to hear a lot of different things, and people that have different opinions from you, they might tell you that you're wrong. And I'm like, you can't be wrong with your opinion.
Yeah.
If you have a feeling about something, you can't be your feelings from you. And I said, and I was telling Noah, I was like, you disagree with me that you have to pay for your Xbox, right? You know, it's kind of like a joke. And I said, well, it's okay to disagree with that you feel like I should buy it. I said, but you're still wrong. So, you know, so it just trying to get them to understand about these things things will happen, and things that'll happen that you don't like, and people will do you wrong. That's just part of humanity. And so it's how you react to these things. And you can hold it in and let it eat you up, and you can be mad at somebody, and, you know, you want to do horrible things. None of that helps anything. So, just trying to keep them conscious of, you know, you have every right to your feelings, but you can still be wrong in that. So,
Liran, one day little Emily's going to grow up.
Yeah.
And she's going to start dating. How's Mr. Liran? how does he get his head around that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you want to have a balance of, you know, instilling good values and rules, and also letting go a little bit. You know, I think you have to, and I think kids have to make mistakes and also learn from them. So, you know, I don't know exactly, you know, how I'm going to react, but I will say that I'll put some rules in place, and if you follow the rules, and if you do well in school, and, you know, you're generally you know, keep, you know, generally listening, then you would get privileges along with that, and if you're not, then you wouldn't. But, you know, I think it's just putting some rules in place, and also instilling good values now, right? Like the things your kids learn now are, you know, are going to shape how or the things your kids learn when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are going to shape how they are in the future when they date, and, you know, their personality and how they view things, etc. But, you know, I think it's a balance of, you know, I certainly made mistakes when I was in high school. I'm sure you did. I'm sure Barkus did. And I turned out okay, right? Like, so I think also
Never.
it's I think also it's you know, knowing that your kids are going to make some mistakes, and you can't be, they call it what, like a helicopter parent, you know, that's like overly on top of your kids, because they'll also resent you for that, and they might rebel against that just on purpose, you know. So smothering, right? So I think I'd much rather have an open relationship with my child and talk to them and have them tell me stuff than be so crazy about stuff that they're not telling me stuff and doing it behind my back. So that's my goal. You know, what reality would look like, you know.
Time will tell, my friend. Time will tell.
Time will tell, you know. But my goal is to have some kind of balance on allowing things and not being crazy, and having some rules in place.
Yeah. Barkus, your daughter brings home, or the first boy knocks on the door, asks for a hand to take her to the cinema. Do you do a Bad Boys Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, or how do you play that one?
Until they're married, yeah, every single time. Like I hope that I will treat my son and my daughters the exact same. Like, have respect for others, but respect yourself as well. Because it's very easy to see, like for men, it's very easy to see guys, even teenagers, that I'm like, all right, the kid's no good. It's just go away. And women can do the same thing, So it's going to be hard for me if my daughters like a boy and I just get a vibe from him.
Yeah.
But he's also going to know that I get a vibe, like a bad vibe. I'm just like, look, man, you're already on thin ice. I don't even know your last name yet. So it'll just be like,
yeah.
And I don't know. My parents were never really strict in that aspect, but I don't know. It's obvious. It's definitely going to be. I'll definitely be the overprotective dad that makes awkward situations. So, and I'm really okay with that. Like,
I know. I mean, I joke about it, but I think that's the only thing that is going to push our daughters away if we do that kind of thing. Like they turn up at the door and it's like, "Hey, motherfucker, comes around the back here. You're going to get a slap. You bring her home by this time. If I catch you jumping in bed with her, that's it." And that is just going to push your child away. I know we joke about it, but that will push her. I think
I do.
Yeah.
At the same time,
Wellington says bad boys every time.
Bad boys for life. Yeah. Bad dads for life. I know that it might push my daughter away, but I would rather my daughter be mad at me for like 6 months than just, be around a bad guy. Like I'll have no problems if I just know the kid's bad, or if God forbid anything happens, then it's just game over. Like
you close the show. Yeah.
Thankfully, my wife's an attorney, so I'll have good representation.
She'll get you out of trouble. Yeah. I think like in order to avoid to getting that point as well, if we're able to somehow bring up rounded children who has sense about them, and they are not insecure. Everyone will be insecure, but to a point that they don't fall for that type of person because they have enough self-awareness. So as fathers, we've got the opportunity. Like my dream is to bring up my little girl to be a strong, independent woman who's very aware of herself, and knows what she wants and has her own mind, and she won't be talked down to, but equally very respectful. No games, no nothing else, just very straightforward with people, and be able to feel confident in her own skin and that she's happy. And I think if we do that, that's the
dream.
That's the dream, isn't it? As parents, as fathers. And I think if we can help cultivate that level of support in our children somehow, then a lot of those things go away, don't they? With the bad man turning up at the door and all that kind of stuff, because hopefully you're helping reduce them being in those vulnerable situations and falling for that shit.
Yeah, the dream is just independence and not just, financial independence.
Yeah. Anything
also emotional independence. Like you don't like that's all I like.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you.
Go ahead.
Last bit there.
Oh, I was just saying the dream is just instilling independence.
You've got such good words of wisdom, and it keeps dropping out. It's really good stuff.
I think emotional independence, which I really think is confidence in a lot of ways, right? Like, instilling confidence in your kids, because if there's a bully but they're confident, then they're not going to let that affect them. Or if there's like peer pressure, whatever it is, if you're confident, then you know, and you don't have a low self-esteem, or, you know, you're not pressured by other kids, then you'll be able to make good decisions, hopefully. But, you know, we know, I think every teenager along the way is going to make some mistakes.
Yeah. Cool. Right. It's coming up to 54 minutes in. Should we sign off?
Think so. It's a good discussion.
Barkus, what's the best way people can reach you?
On
Every time you go
Facebook,
to speak, we
shoot me a message. Barkus. One thing I want to say real quick before my internet goes shitty again. There's an incredible thing that I've listened to for several years. It's called the Harvard Study. The Harvard Study is a study that a Harvard professor, Liran knows what I'm talking about, started in the 40s, and it was really about what makes men happy. And it's still ongoing. And they've interviewed, they've interviewed men, and they've interviewed their kids and their grandkids. They've interviewed celebrities, past presidents, and everything. There's some really cool information out there about like the relationships that you have with your parents and your grandparents impact how you have relationships in the future and your success and all these things. So for any dads out there, it's like a super cool read. There's tons of podcasts, YouTube videos, books out there. I don't have anything specific, but I just love talking about it. It's a really cool thing to really like unwrap in your head when you start listening to it. Any final words from you, Liran?
No, I think this is a good discussion. I guess I should watch the documentary. Social, what's it called? Social Signals.
Social Dilemma.
Social Dilemma. Okay, great. Yeah, on Netflix.
So there's one thing I'd like to add here. If people want to check out, there's a good thing. We had a guy called Richard Grennan on the show a few weeks ago. He's a specialist in NLP. He's dealt with mental health issues, and he has a really good background in stuff. And he's got a free course called the Mental Health Fortress, which is free. You can find it on YouTube. It's like a 4 or 5 part series. I actually spoke to him the other day and messaged him and said, look, is there a kids version? Because I think this would be a great framework for kids. You know, it talks about the fight, the flight, the fawning. If anyone's had like trauma earlier on in their life and stuff like that. So that's free on YouTube. You should go and check out what he's doing now. Big shout out to all the fathers out there. We're doing our best, and hope you're well, guys. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be back here again 4 p.m. BST tomorrow, and take care.
Thank you.